Morning all. So, thank you Miles for that very flattering introduction. The problem with flattering introductions when you reach my stage in life, it just emphasizes maybe how long you've been around and age, which is not something I really need reminding about. Anyway, I'm the guy in the room with the funny accent today. I grew up in Ireland. I've been extraordinarily fortunate to work in many places around the world, and today have a global remit, which among other things includes Crawford's US and global catastrophe responses. So today I'm not going to dwell so much on the US. There are many more acquainted speakers that you'll be hearing from during the course of the conference. But I would like to share some perspectives as they relate to global catastrophe, and in particular, some of the trends that we're seeing and how Crawford is dealing with those. First and foremost, though, I think it is appropriate to mention that in global terms, as every one of you knows, the US is the biggest market. It's also the biggest market in catastrophe. It's also the market which costs insurers where they pay the most in terms of indemnity spend for catastrophe events. Nevertheless, that still leaves about 35 to 40% of exposure which arises elsewhere in the world. And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about today. And I want to share with you, what we're seeing on the global stage, maybe have a look at what we're doing in Crawford, particularly around resourcing and technology to manage these events. And for CAT adjusters in the room, I want to give you a flavor of the types of opportunities that do arise in Crawford and are actually in play today. Because even as we speak, we have colleagues from Canada and New Zealand who are helping our Australian adjusters following bushfires, hailstorms and floods. In the UK, following two serious named storms and related floods, we have adjusters from Northern Ireland working across England and Wales, and we're looking at probably mobilizing some colleagues from mainland Europe. We have US adjusters in Puerto Rico today. In the past, we've had Spanish colleagues helping our adjusting firms in Latin America, and indeed supported by US because there is a very strong Spanish language competency. And indeed, right across our Asia-Pacific region, we have adjusters who mobilize throughout that region to respond to tsunamis and typhoons in places like Japan, Philippines, Taiwan, Hong Kong. And I'm mentioning all these examples because it says something of the global nature of CAT events. And very importantly, I think it says something about Crawford's ability to respond to those events with rapid deployments wherever in the world the events strike. At Crawford, we have invested and we continue to invest in the technology, tools, data analytics, and very importantly, and which is wrapped around this conference, training. And all of those things combine to put us in the premier position to respond, and respond rapidly with quality technical service anywhere in the world, and also with a very high degree of customer care, which, as we know, is critical in most markets. One of the differences I should probably bring out that we see elsewhere in the world versus the US is that nowhere else do we have a cohort or a roster of catastrophe adjusters on standby, ready to roll as soon as an event occurs. In almost every other geography, the first line of defense is actually our daily adjusters having to step up and deal with that surge in claims. And I'll just explain a little bit about how that works, because as you can imagine, you're dealing with your business as usual. You have a surge event, and the only way that we can expand that capacity from a traditional perspective is people working very, very long hours, 7 days a week, and over very prolonged periods. And the prolonged periods are exacerbated because in a lot of markets, the adjusters don't hand off claims at cash settlement or hand off claims at estimate. They've got to stay with the claim from the initial determination of policy liability through the assessment phase and through the reinstatement phase, and cannot release the claim until that customer is either back in their house or back in their business premises with reinstatement completed. So that essentially means from a traditional perspective, we bump into some pretty big problems. Because if we, for example, with a carrier receive on average, say, 100 claims a week, that's what we're staffed to deal with. A big event comes through and suddenly we're asked to take 500 or 1,000 claims in a 24 or 48-hour period. Where does the resource come from? So, as always, necessity is the mother of invention. So at Crawford, what we have done, we have built a whole suite of tools and responses to support our adjusters on the global scene. And that includes things like We Go Look and mobilizing our lookers. It includes self-service apps. It includes qualified and licensed adjusters at the desk to support those boots on the ground. It includes outbound call programs for customers. And so we can leverage the adjuster resource we have to its maximum. However, even with pulling all of those levers, when we get a very big event or a series of events in succession, we do turn to colleagues overseas and we mobilize our forces from around the world to bring that to bear on a particular location. In a world where immediate responses and assistance is expected by our clients and their customers, this ability to mobilize on a global basis enables us to provide a much more comprehensive response than the traditional loss adjusting firms, who essentially only have adjusters, or the single country players. Those firms and competitors typically exhaust their capacity very, very quickly, resulting in delays. And as every adjuster in the room will know, delays only lead to two or three things. One is a client who's not particularly happy, a customer who's complaining, and very often a more costly claim because mitigation works take longer to get on train simply because the adjuster isn't there to steer it. Last week, I saw that firsthand. I was in the UK and I visited Wales. Now, Wales is one of 7 locations around the UK which has flooded in about a 10-day period. So as you can imagine, all the resources are quite stretched. I mentioned at the outset that we have drafted in resources from Northern Ireland, which remained unaffected. But I went out with an adjuster on a job on day 3. So the event happened on Sunday, I was there on Wednesday. But what had happened on day 1, and nobody else could do this, we mobilized our lookers. We had a looker there by late Monday morning with that insured. That set in motion several things. Firstly, the customer knew they were not forgotten, knew that we were aware of their predicament and we cared. Secondly, by taking the images and getting them back to a qualified desk adjuster, that desk adjuster could set in motion the initial drying out mobilization, start the stripping out works, place that customer in an alternative accommodation, and had initiated an interim payment from the carrier because the only clothes that the policyholder and his family had, they were wearing. Now, you can imagine that when you arrive with the adjuster on day 3 and all that's in motion, it's a very, very different meeting. It's far more productive for our adjuster because the adjuster is just straight in handling the claim. There's no angst, there's no concern by the customer, by the policyholder, and things are actually moving along quite swiftly. And in many of those instances, by leveraging people like lookers in our community, we actually draw quite a lot of compliment about our response. It also means that we can leverage a response that's many multiples of anything we could possibly achieve if we relied on our adjusters only. But that said, a looker is not a substitute for adjuster. It's never going to be a substitute for an adjuster with complex claims like flood, but it does enable us to get out there fast. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of our business and of Crawford. And I dare say that's whether it's in the US or anywhere else in the world. As we look to the future, we are investing in a range of supporting tools and technologies. And one of those was mentioned earlier, Renova. So we are deploying Renova for adjusters anywhere for deployment of adjusters based on a suite of suitability and performance criteria. Our digital first notification of loss and smart triage to acquire and distribute claims with the least amount of friction and delay, smart scoping and estimating software, some claims decisions that can be driven by AI, and all of that means that the valuable adjuster resource, the trained and experienced adjuster resource, is being brought to bear where it can add most value in the claim journey. And again, in my view, all of that adds up to a fast, consistent CAT response and claims handling service. One issue that we are coming across, if I just maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about global carriers, many of whom are involved either as direct insurers or reinsurers in many of the events around the world. Those carriers are at various stages of global tendering for services, including CAT. So rather than country-by-country selection, they're looking at a global procurement process. And although some are not quite there yet, I think the direction of travel is undeniable. Crawford is at the forefront in these developments. And we're at the forefront because we have the footprint. We are creating the base for global consistency of service, and we have the presence around the world. And we're also undergoing, in many of our geographies, quite a radical digital transformation at the moment, which in itself will help us when it comes to data and related analytics and insights. And for me, I just imagine how powerful it could potentially be if for every single catastrophe event, we could go to our clients with insights reports, and those reports detailing the claim cost drivers, detailing client satisfaction scores, the points where there's most friction in a claim, and more importantly than anything else, be able to demonstrate that our satisfaction scores are among the highest, and that the quality that we're delivering, which is always measured, I believe, in indemnity dollars, because ultimately we're asked to do a job and to do a technical job and do it accurately. If we can demonstrate that with data, rather than just gut feel, or because we say we're better, so we must be better, I think that's a pretty powerful place to be. We are on that journey today. We are doing some of it, and we're going to be doing an awful lot more of it. When I was preparing for this conference and looking at the different strands, and I've just done a quick canter through really some of the core things that I see on the global landscape. But when I look at it, I actually see quite a significant convergence happening. And that convergence is around firms, that convergence is around the technologies being used, that convergence is around the outcomes that are expected by the clients in an ever-demanding world. We all know our clients. Demands are rising. They're only rising in line with customer demands, and bear in mind, we too are those customers who drive demands from the services that we consume. But that convergence, I think, is going to continue. It's going to be relentless. I don't think I would like to stand up here today and say it's suddenly going to overrun what is the US CAT market, because I go back to some of the differences that I expressed at the outset. But I think the outcomes and the expectations that clients have are very, very similar wherever we go around the world, US included. So I think that convergence is a journey. We are definitely on it, and we're investing heavily to stay on it and to stay relevant. But in closing, and as a person who started out life as an adjuster, my view is that we must never, ever forget that we're here to help people at a time of need. I'm sure most of you have been on people's doorsteps or in small businesses where people are quite literally broken and in tears and have no idea where to go and what to do next. That's the job that we do. And that job fits very, very neatly, in my view, to the Crawford mission of restoring lives, businesses, and communities. And as I said, I don't think we should ever, ever forget that. So I want to thank you all for your time and forbearance this morning. I hope maybe I've shared some of the perspectives from a global point of view with you that might be of some benefit. And just remains for me to wish everybody a super conference and enjoy the couple of days. Thank you.